Can I try to share my slides now, or should we wait until it's actually?
No, we're ready. We're ready.
We're ready? Okay.
Yeah. So,
Oh, it's 1 o'clock. Y'all don't even know, but I'm about to tell you.
welcome back from lunch, everyone. And as you can see, Nancy's here. She's ready. And Nancy Kirkpatrick, Dean, Director, CEO, all of the wonderful things of the libraries at Smith College, who is going to wrap us up today. So, Nancy, you should be able to share, but take your time. And there we go.
So but I really want, now it's on a different screen. You know how, when you're on Zoom and it moves all the things to different places, and I need them on the place that I can see them, and I want to be able to see you all, sort of. And sorry, y'all. It's what Dr. Cook is being kind and not sharing with you is that I literally just moved over lunch hour. And when I say I moved, what I mean is the moving truck showed up and unloaded all my stuff. So I just need to find my notes and then I'll be good to go. I don't know if I have the mental bandwidth to also look at Slack chat at the same time. I'm not sure I can do it. So if there are things happening in chat, yep.
Yeah, Nancy, Aisha, and I will monitor the chat. And
perfect, thank you.
As always, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box.
Y'all, because I just want to find my darn talk itself. There we go. Okay. Oh, thank you all for a little grace today. It has been a minute. So I am Nancy Kirkpatrick. I'm the new Dean of Libraries at Smith College. I've been here on campus since Tuesday. I just moved into my apartment over lunch hour while hopefully you all were eating some lunch and taking care of your needs. And I couldn't be happier to be here today. I am frankly honored to be joining you for this conversation about building radical empathy. And so I'm just going to jump right in and say that I want to start by reframing what we often dismiss as soft skills. Soft skills, right? These are not optional niceties. They are survival skills. They are liberation skills. They are the skills that allow us to build trust, dismantle harmful systems, and create institutions where every voice is valued. And empathy is not a passive feeling. It is a conscious choice, a radical act. How we show up for each other, how we listen, and how we design programs and spaces has real consequences for equity, justice, and representation. This initiative, this curriculum, the toolkit, the professional development model you've been talking about for, 2 years now, is amazing to me, even though I'm a newcomer to it. And I believe it has the power to transform not just individuals, but the very culture of our libraries, museums, and archives by equipping emerging leaders, especially those from historically excluded communities. And frankly, the last 2 days of this gathering have energized me. So again, thank you, Dr. Cook and Dr. Johnson, for inviting me to share in this work. I hope I can give back at least a little portion of what I've already gained from being here for the last 2 days. So today I'm going to invite you into what I'm going to call the soft revolution. We're going to explore how empathy, positive psychology, appreciative inquiry, social capital, and rest, yes, rest, can become a foundation for personal growth and systemic change. These skills are not soft because they are easy. They are soft because they require vulnerability, courage, and care in a world that often rewards the opposite. And frankly, the world doesn't always expect or allow us to be vulnerable, but it is worth taking the risk to try this approach. In fact, you can start outside of work. And in a little bit, I'm going to share a story of how practicing soft skills enabled a better relationship with one of the most important people in my life. But first, I have 2 points of business to get out of the way. First, I will reference some authors and books and articles. And yes, I pulled together a reference list. I've already sent it to Drs. Cook and Johnson, so you can look at that afterwards. I triple check the hyperlinks. Everything should be working. Fingers crossed. And I will note that I included 2 or 3 resources that don't necessarily center the BIPOC or library experience, but this was intentional. Because if we want to build new systems, we need to be acquainted with how the current ones work or don't, so we don't repeat history. Second thing, I'm going to ask several respond, or you can jot down notes on your, on paper for yourself to look at later. That's completely up to you. All right, now let's see if I can. Aha. Okay, I'm assuming the slide advanced and we're cooking with fire at this point. Thank you. Okay. So for decades, we've been told that soft skills are nice to haves, a complement to the so-called hard skills that supposedly get the work done. But I think that framing is wrong. These are not soft skills, these are power skills. They determine whether we create workplaces rooted in trust or fear, whether we lead teams that thrive or burn out, and whether historically excluded voices are heard or ignored. The US Army actually coined the term soft skills in the 1960s to describe interpersonal and leadership abilities that couldn't be captured in technical manuals. But in today's world, calling them soft dismisses their value. In a time of racial reckoning, climate crisis, and widening inequities, empathy, adaptability, and emotional intelligence are revolutionary competencies. So let's be explicit. Power skills include adaptability, intercultural literacy, empathy, and leadership. Keith Caver and Stella Livers, in their classic Dear White Boss article, which many of you have probably read in the Harvard Business Review, I think 2020, highlight the fact that BIPOC professionals often face environments where leadership norms are designed by and for white men. Power skills aren't just about navigating those systems, they're about changing them.
I think that is Nancy's connection. Yeah. Okay. Temporary issue. You're on mute.
Unmute. I don't know what just happened that caused me to drop off, but let me re-share my slides.
No worries. It was stalling a little bit prior, so
Oh,
hopefully
okay. Okay.
that's resolved itself. Yeah.
Hopefully, well, I was gonna say hopefully, and I'm plugged in, hardwired, we should be good to go. So let me go back to that screen, share again. Are you seeing the slides again? Yes, okay, great.
Yes.
So sorry about that. Now that today is gonna throw me. So what I was hoping to share here is that this is the heart of soft revolution, reclaiming emotional intelligence, empathy, and cultural competencies as sources of systemic change. And these skills aren't ornamental, they are the engine of justice work. So next, I have my first reflection for you all. Wrong screen. Okay, so the way. Name one soft skill you've maybe been told is a weakness in the past. How could you reclaim it and reframe it? If you want to share in chat, I'll let you do that if you'd like. I know that in the past, one soft skill that I was told was a weakness was being shy, and I am an introvert. I'm an INFJ according to Myers-Briggs, and so it took me a long time to learn that it was okay to be introverted, and that didn't mean I was shy, but also that meant that in a lot of situations, I come in and just observe and listen first and collect data. And that data then informs how I move forward. So it's a thing that isn't always valued, but in my mind, I think that being quiet and observant can really be a skill that can help you in your career. So, and frankly, in life. So there's just one example. If you all want to share some in the chat, like I said, feel free, or just think about this and conjure on it for later. So.
Did you want me to share the things people are saying in the chat? Because I'm not sure if you can see it or not.
Oh, I can't, hang on. Fellow INFJ, actually, now that I've figured out what's happening and we're connected again. Yes, if there's a lot, go for it. Why don't you share what people are.
Sure, no problem. Lauren says emotional. Sarah mentions too sensitive or dramatic.
Yeah.
Desiree says people say I'm too quiet. I think I'm just observant. And you have, of course, a fellow INFJ. And yes, Gabby says it's how she is to observe it. Absolutely.
Yes, and I love, Sarah, that the too sensitive or dramatic, because I think that one really depends on who it is. Like if I was presenting as a white woman, they would say I was taking care, but if I'm a Black woman, I'm being too sensitive, right? So it's just the frame. Talk a tiny bit about some neuroscience and help you figure out why your brain does what it does. So positive psychology is sometimes misunderstood as feel-good science, but that actually couldn't be further from the truth. It was developed by Martin Seligman, and I'm going to do my best with this name, and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in 2000, and it is the study of what allows individuals and communities to thrive even in the face of adversity. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory shows us that positive emotions don't just make us feel good, they expand our ability to see possibilities, make connections, and solve problems creatively. And they literally, when your brain is functioning at this level, it literally expands your peripheral vision. So they've done studies to show like if your view goes from this to this, which is a wonderful thing. This is exactly the mindset that we need for empathy and justice work. So research on brain science backs this up. When we're fearful or defensive, we're being operated by our amygdala, which is this tiny little almond-shaped thing sort of in the back of your brain at the base. And it's there for good reason. It's part of evolution, right? And so it's the thing that causes you to fight or flight, go into fight or flight mode, and it narrows your focus and makes you more reactive because it's trying to save your life. The challenge is that in modern day society, sometimes there are threats and then there are threats, right? And your brain doesn't know the difference, so it reacts to all threats the same. So one of the things that we can do is learn to identify because when we feel safe, supported, and seen, our brains shift to openness and learning. Jackie Stavros and Sherry Torres wrote this great book called Conversations Worth Having, and it emphasizes that asking appreciative, strengths-based questions can rewire our brain states in real time, fostering connection and trust. Simple shifts like asking what's working well or what do you hope for transform our neural patterns and relationships. And I've seen the transformative power of Conversations Worth Having in action because it's changed literally my life and how I approach parenting, work, and frankly, relationships in general. So I learned about CWH, Conversations Worth Having, in 2017, 2018. And I went to a training and I was so intrigued that I became certified in the practice itself. And I facilitated this content in person and online as a one-day learning event or a 4-week series or whatever the audience needs for librarians and academics alike. And it's a really interesting concept because even folks who start the day sort of saying, yeah, I don't know about this Conversations Worth Having thing, or, I warn them we're going to engage in some activities and they have to talk to each other. And some people don't like that. They don't buy into it. By the end of the training, always people have bonded, have enjoyed that time together and have learned something that they will take home and use. So in my introduction, I promised you a story about how these practices improved one of the most important relationships in my life. And that's
Okay, hardwired is not going to be the solution, okay? Please hold in our technical difficulties on Nancy's end. We know how this goes when, you're in a new location. So we'll see if she hop back on in a few minutes.
But I love how she cut out on a cliffhanger. Like, I need to know what the story is.
I needed to know. I was holding on. I'm like, she promised it. Here it is. We'll give her a few. There we go.
She's
We
got
got
help.
backup. We got backup.
I went to ask for help because I could see that it was going to happen again, and I'm not sure why my tech does not like me today. Do you have any sense? I mean, am I connected to the right
Yep,
network?
that's what I was gonna check. Yes?
Yes,
Yep, can you just click on the settings right there?
I can click on the settings. My apologies, y'all. We operate in real time here.
That's where you should be.
That's where I should be.
Yeah.
Full bars.
Yep, there's
Nothing
nothing different.
Yeah, I shut down everything else on my computer before I started, so I wouldn't have. Okay, we're gonna just keep going. But if it happens again, I might message you on Slack and panic. Okay, thank you, Danny. Oh, I'm so sorry, y'all. I don't know why this is happening to us.
It cut off right as you were about to mention your story.
Okay, thank you for giving me context. Let me share that screen one last time, I hope. And okay, so I was going to tell you a story about how these practices that I learned in Conversation Worth Having improved one of the most important relationships in my life, and that's my relationship with my daughter. I could talk about my kids for hours and hours. I promise not to do that. But I am the proud parent of 2 brilliant kids. Yes, I'm biased. That doesn't mean they're not brilliant. I have been raising these brilliant humans alone since I divorced their dad about a decade ago when they were in middle school. And if you're a parent, you know how challenging and rewarding that is, whether you're doing it alone or with a partner or in community with a family of, by blood or family of choice. It's not for the faint of heart. And also, spoiler, if you don't have kids, once you decide to have kids, there is no warranty and the return policy does not exist. You get them for as long as you get them. So let me be clear. I adore my children, and parenting is the best job I've ever had. Although Dean of Libraries at Smith is very close as a second. And it's also the most exhausting and stressful and heart heavy. So I want to talk about my daughter when she was in college because we don't have time and I'm unwilling to experience the trauma of talking about her high school years again, especially when she's not here to defend herself. So she started college in the fall of 2019. And then she came home for spring break. Oh, and sorry, I'm looking at chat and distracting myself. Conversations Worth Having is the book and also the website that I talked about earlier where I learned some of these skills. So she started college in 2019. She came home for spring break. The global pandemonium known as COVID-19 happened and everything went to hell in a handbasket. And so she had to pivot to online learning. We had to pivot to online work. And then my son, surprise, had to pivot to doing his first year of law school from my craft room. So it was really, we were experiencing what you all were experiencing, just complete and utter chaos is what it felt like. And also trying who the upside to the pandemic for me was I got 18 months with my kids that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, but I still hate what it meant for all of us. And I also experienced loss during the pandemic and it was not great. So we were all doing the best that we could and we survived. And eventually she went back to school and now she had to manage the stress of living with strangers because she did the first 2.5 years of college from the basement and going back to class in person and just the general business of adulting. And she would call or text when she was stressed out and start going down a doom spiral. It's like doom scrolling, but it's in conversation with people who love you and support you. And before Conversations Worth Having, I didn't know what to do when that happened. So I would try to solve it. I was a fixer. Any other fixers in the room? You hear a problem, you immediately go into problem solving mode. How can I fix it? Yeah. So I was that. And probably still am, but now I know it. So after taking this training, I stopped trying to fix everything immediately. Instead, I started listening because part of what you learn in Conversations Worth Having is that deep listening leads to really good conversations. And then I started asking questions. And I did that so that she would be empowered to come up with the answers or solutions to the things that she was facing. So if she would call and say, I'm freaked out about this exam, I'm going to fail chemistry, I'm going to drop out of college, like she would start the doom spiral, I would stop her and go, okay, listen, so let's have a real conversation. If you really failed your chemistry exam, what would actually happen? And she would say, well, okay, I'd probably have to retake the exam, or maybe I'd have to retake the class. And I would say, and then what would happen? And then I would finish my degree and graduate from college. Like she would begrudgingly realize that by asking these questions, she was catastrophizing. And while that could be what could happen, I challenged her to think about what are the other stories that could happen as well. And it worked. And it also took me off the hook for trying to solve all of her problems. So, in fact, it worked so well that she started to recognize when I was doing it. So she would call and start going down the doom thing, and then I would ask her a question. And then about 4 questions in, she would say, "You're doing that thing." And I'd be like, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I am doing that thing." But now, 2 years, 3 years later, she does it for herself, sometimes even when I'm not available. And that to me is the beauty of this, because we are living proof that you can retrain your brain and way of thinking and maybe even influence others to do it simply by modeling that change. She didn't take the class. She doesn't know what conversations worth having is. She hasn't read the book. She couldn't care less. But when she starts to stress herself out, sometimes her first question to herself is, what can I control in this situation? And that alone helps her realize, like, oh, I am worried about these 17 things, but I can control only these 2. And that's what she focuses on. So I think this is a super powerful tool. I encourage you to check the book out from your library. You know, we bought the ebook at the last university I was at. I don't know if we have it here, but we will by the time I'm, done with my first week. It is a really, really great tool, and it works at work as well. So back to the meat of this talk. Focusing on the positive is not about ignoring harm or pain. It's about giving our nervous systems the resilience to confront injustice without shutting down. That's why positive psychology is a revolutionary tool. It equips us to approach equity work with creativity and courage, not exhaustion. Now, I'm going to quote Audre Lorde probably like 5 times, but here's the first one, because I believe she captured this beautifully when she wrote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." Positive psychology and neuroscience affirm what Lorde knew intuitively, that care, curiosity, and joy are tools while we dismantle systems that harm us. All right, I feel like every time I go to a prompt or change the slide, it becomes a dicey situation, but we're just going to pray that this time it works. Okay, so I have a reflection for you. Think of a time you felt truly seen or supported at work. How did that change your ability to show up? What would it mean to create that feeling for others every day as we're developing this curriculum and trying to do this in bigger, even better ways? And I'll stop talking for a moment while you think about that, and I'll see if anybody shares something in chat. Oh, okay. First of all, Desiree, yes, it's hard not to take on our children's stress as parents and problem solve. But if we want to help them learn to solve problems, we have to give them room to fail and figure it out and help them do that. So it's hard, but with practice, you can do it. And trust me, there are still times where my kids call and say blah, 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 and I just try to solve it. Renee, I am sorry that you have never felt that. And I'm glad that that's why you're trying to create that for others. And I hope that you eventually land in a system where your system changes so that you do feel seen and supported at work, because that's got to be exhausting and disheartening.
Thank you for that. Just FYI, I won't ever have it because this is it for me. When I'm done here, I am done. I am, I'll be either retiring or just quitting. But I do appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Mahasan is saying that it really changed everything to be seen and supported, which is great. Gabby, hey Gabby, remember planning an event with a coworker and realizing she had some of the same ideas, right? So that sort of synergy of we both are excited about this thing can be really empowering. Genevia says when she was able to have flex time at work, that made her feel supported and seen. That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you did experience that positive thing. And Julie says she's having radical hope that we can all feel it. I agree. I hope that we get to the point where this becomes the norm and not the exception, because it can be a game changer for systems when you can feel this way. And I have to say, at my last institution, I did not feel truly seen or supported, which is probably part of why I only stayed for 2 years. And now I couldn't be happier to be in a system that has already demonstrated their level of care for me. And I've literally been here for 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So, okay, there's a couple more things. Okay, I'm glad it made collaborating a lot stressful when you had that shared idea. Oh yes, and sharing that burden of the programming and the work is great. So wow, Desiree, when you finally felt supported in a situation, it made you tear up. That's good. I mean, it's okay to have emotions at work as well. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So, all right, thank you all for sharing. So yesterday was amazing, but Dr. Benjamin was brilliant and introduced us to several AIs outside of artificial intelligence, which I thought was really fun. And I'm going to give you one more. My AI is appreciative inquiry. And it is often described as a strengths-based approach to change, but it's more than a method. It's a mindset rooted in respect and possibility. So this theory, this concept, was developed by David Cooperrider and Suresh Srivastava. They were at Case Western in Cleveland. And appreciative inquiry, or the other AI as I call it, flips traditional problem solving on its head. Instead of focusing exclusively on what's broken, it asks, and this is part of why conversations worth having works, because it's rooted in these principles. You ask, what gives life to the system? What is worth building on? What do we most value and want more of? So at first glance, this might seem like we're bypassing harm, but as I just mentioned, AI is not about ignoring pain. It's about creating a foundation strong enough to face that pain honestly. It is justice oriented because it recenters relationships, collective wisdom, and vision over deficit-based narratives. So there's a little bit of a debate about whether appreciative inquiry design has 4Ds or 5Ds, and to me, it's frankly all semantics. I chose an illustration with 5, A, because I like the graphic, B, because it fit on the page, and C, because I could help walk you through it. So as you can see, this practice is process-based, and it might feel familiar because some of these concepts are used in other ways and have been adapted and adopted in a variety of ways. So the skinny is this: there are 4 or 5 phases that all start with the letter D, and you work your way through them in order. And then you try the solution you come up with for a while, get some data, and know that you can adapt and iterate whenever needed by following the same steps. So step 1 is to define what is our desired outcome in this situation. Step 2 is to do some data gathering and discover what are our strengths. Step 3 is dream. This is my favorite one because this is where you say, what would work in the future? What does our perfect program look like? What does our perfect system look like? What is this, if we're really operating well, valuing all the people that matter, doing the things that give us joy, what does that look like? The 4th phase in this is the design phase. And that really is, okay, so how do we make that happen? We just imagined this beautiful world system program. How do we make that happen? And then last, you do it. You deploy it, you take the action, you do the thing. And then the way it works for me is you collect some data and then you figure out, do we want to do it again? Do we want to change it the next time we do it? Did it not work at all? And that's valuable too, right? Because even when we do things and they don't work, we can still learn from them. But I do really like this system because it's generally easy to remember and it's something that is still accessible. So I love appreciative inquiry for the 5Ds. I've used it to do strategic planning. I've used it to do programming at our library, professional development. You can apply it in so many situations. And I hope that it's a tool that you find helpful as well. I also appreciate the fact that there's some scholarship from BIPOC practitioners that helps deepen our understanding. For example, Dr. Gervais Bush's work emphasizes that AI's most transformative power lies in generativity, the ability to spark new conversations that change what's possible. And scholars like Dr. Tabiti Lewis remind us that liberation work requires imagining better futures while refusing to be defined by oppression. So appreciative inquiry is a framework for exactly that, asking radical questions that invite us to envision liberation and build it together. Quoting Audre Lorde again, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Appreciative inquiry offers us new tools, questions, and conversations, tools that are accessible to anyone with a voice, literally, that help dismantle oppressive systems by shifting culture and relationships. It reframes leadership as a collective act of inquiry rather than control. So let's take a moment to try this. Instead of asking, how do we fix bias in cultural institutions, in other words, how do we fix a system that many would say is not broken, but instead is operating exactly as it was designed, we could ask the question, what would a truly liberatory cultural space feel like? And what strengths do we already have to make that real? That simple shift in the question from how do we fix to what would it look like opens us up to more inclusive, empowering conversations. And even in a virtual environment, this practice matters. The way we ask questions in Zoom meetings, team check-ins, or even email can create a sense of belonging. As many AI practitioners like to say, words make worlds. This is how AI becomes not just a leadership tool, but a justice practice. Okay. So, at the heart of radical empathy is self-awareness, the ongoing practice of understanding our own identities, biases, and triggers. Psychologist Daniel Goleman describes self-awareness as a cornerstone of emotional intelligence, a skill that allows us to. For leaders and educators, self-awareness is not just personal growth, it's an ethical responsibility. And I feel like we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that it feels like there's a burden that this, in the BIPOC community in particular, we are maybe hyperly self-aware. And then we're also really aware of our colleagues who are not self-aware, if that makes any sense, right? So it kind of feels like, why do I have to do this work when nobody else is doing this work? Well, let's talk about that. So radical empathy asks us to examine power. That means grappling with our own positions within systems of privilege and oppression and committing to ongoing self-reflection. Self-awareness becomes revolutionary when it disrupts narratives that say emotional labor is optional for some and mandatory for others. It should be the playing field that makes people realize that emotional labor is something that we all need to take up collectively. It is not just meant for people of color or people from a certain race or people from a certain some other sort of category that we have been used to be othered by. Pairing self-awareness with vulnerability is an essential leadership trait that psychologist Brene Brown, not a fan, but describes as the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Now, here's why I'm not a fan of Ms. Brown, because she doesn't address the fact that vulnerability in justice work is risky, particularly for BIPOC professionals, because institutions often weaponize it against us. So creating environments where people can bring their whole selves to work, however they define that whole selves in whatever way they want to bring it to work, requires leaders who model vulnerability responsibly, ensuring it is not a one-sided expectation, but a shared cultural norm. The ethics of care, first articulated in depth by feminist scholars like Carol Gilligan and further explored by Black feminist thinkers, challenges transactional relationships and hierarchical systems. It insists that empathy, listening, and nurturing are central to leadership. They are not peripheral soft skills. In libraries, museums, and archives, an ethic of care reshapes policies and practices to center the well-being of staff, students, and communities, especially those who have been historically excluded. And I don't know how we have any conversation about self-awareness without acknowledging imposter syndrome, which disproportionately affects BIPOC professionals navigating predominantly white institutions. I am a person who, when I learned about imposter syndrome, I thought, oh, I've definitely experienced that. And it made me, I've been in spaces where I've questioned, like, am I qualified to be here? Should I be here? What am I doing in this space? And it is generally when you're in a predominantly white space. But there's a great author named Elizabeth Leiba who reframes this experience as imposter treatment. It is not a syndrome. It is not a thing that you are doing to yourself. These are feelings of inadequacy often attributed to individuals that are actually the result of external bias, micro and macroaggressions, and systemic inequities. So what if your imposter syndrome is not imposter syndrome, it's imposter treatment? That takes the burden off you, right? Because when professionals internalize these signals, your confidence and self-worth can be undermined. But Leiba emphasizes that confronting these structural and interpersonal barriers, rather than blaming yourself, is key to reclaiming agency and building resilience in professional spaces. Her book is called I'm Not Yelling. It's wonderful. Her first book, she's, I think, written a second and maybe a third since then. But it's a really great look at how Black women experience the professional workplace. And there's an entire chapter on people touching our hair, y'all. And I know y'all know. Yes, thank you, Mahasen. It is a great book. So if you just need to be validated in your professional work experience as a Black woman, go grab a copy of that book. You will, the number of times I have like nodded my head and been like, yep. It's like church in a book. So go for it. All right. Finally, one of my other favorite people is Trisha Hersey, and she introduced the fact that rest is a radical act. She is the founder of the NAP Ministry, and she is the author of Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto. I love this book. I love any book that's a manifesto. And one of the things that she writes is rest is a form of resistance because it disrupts and pushes back against capitalism and white supremacy. Rest is not laziness, it is liberation. Integrating rest into professional development, leadership strategies, and personal practice challenges those harmful narratives about productivity and worthiness. So together, self-awareness, vulnerability, care, and rest form a soft skills revolution. And this slide made me giggle a little because normally, so I used to be on Instagram, but I got off all the socials because of life. But she has a really great social media channel on Instagram. And one of the things that she says often, that I quote often, is lay your ass down. That's her way of saying you need to rest. And I was gonna put that on my slide, but then I didn't, you never know your audience. I know I just said it out loud. It is what it is. But I decided that put down the crown gave the same meaning and actually went with the image. So, and I chose this image in particular and loved it because I do feel like sometimes we can sometimes feel like that lion, that tiger in the mirror, and sometimes we feel like the little kitten that doesn't know what the heck they're doing. And I love that the mouse is over there holding their crown, waiting to support them. So I love this as a visual to remind yourself that it's okay to know who you are, to show courage, to center relationships, but also to put down the darn crown and just take a break, because sometimes we all need that break. All right, so next reflection question is, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Think of a time you felt self-doubt at work. I'm sorry to say many of us will probably be able to do this more easily than we did my last prompt. Was it mostly internal or influenced by external pressures or biases? How might recognizing imposter treatment change how you respond moving forward now that you've been introduced to this concept? Yeah. Okay, chat's a little quiet, so you're all chewing on that. That is okay. Oh, Mahasan says it was both, but it made her feel hopeless. If I felt I couldn't get something done, it was often a lack of external and internal support. Okay, I'm glad, Aisha, that you recognize that it may have been both. So you felt it from external folks at work. They don't take my feedback and suggestions seriously. Yes, all of this, Elizabeth, yes. Interesting that Ashton switched from public libraries to medical, so imposter syndrome is heavy, but it's mostly internal. Interesting. I hope that that book is worth checking out for anyone, I think. But I also hope that as you're there a little bit longer and become more acquainted with your new workplace, that some of that imposter syndrome becomes lighter and frankly goes away entirely. But I get it, because y'all, when Smith called and said they wanted to interview me, I literally was like, I don't know if I'm fancy enough for Smith. Like those are some fancy elite folks up there, and I'm just Nancy from the country in Minnesota. And it was a real thing. But here I am. So challenge those notions in your head. And if you need to tell that voice in your head to shut the heck up for a minute, do that too. Mahasan had a supervisor who put her in a box. Oh, well, I'm glad she retired, because that's awful. Yeah, William says you have to push, and if you're the bad guy, either way. And right, so you need to push the issue because the issue needs to be pushed no matter who does it, and you're taking up that emotional labor, which still comes at a cost. So I hope that there are advocates, allies, somebody at work who can help you potentially not always have to be the person pushing for that issue. Gabby, kudos to you. Gabby recognized that she wasn't an imposter when she witnessed the mediocrity of others in our field getting praised. Girl, when I said to my daughter that I was nervous about this job interview, she literally said, "Mommy, approach it with the confidence of a mediocre white man." And I was like, yes! And that is what I did. Gabby, please unmute and share.
Yes. So the first time I noticed it was definitely after I'd finally been to a few conferences and I kept seeing them talk about the same old thing over and over and over. And I'm like, how are these people, getting paid, getting recognition for talking about the same thing? It tends to be like, is diversity important? How can we show people of color or people from underrepresented backgrounds how they're safe here or whatever? And I'm like, how long have they been talking about this? Because I swear to God, like, it's really not that hard. So after I saw that, I started looking at myself like, am I the imposter? Or are they just like intimidated by the feedback I'm given? And then the part that got me was I brought it up to a white colleague and was like, what is going on with all these people getting published, writing the same thing over and over again? And she was like, you know what? We should just go ahead and write something because we're always sitting here thinking, that everybody else knows better and stuff, but they're making us feel like we don't know anything because we're from lower income backgrounds. We're not from this like elite Ivy League background. We don't have PhDs, but we're the ones doing the work and we have the insight, so might as well.
I am so glad that you figured that out and on your own and earlier in your life than I clearly did, because you're absolutely right. And that the conference presentations and things that are the same thing over and over and over again, you clocked it exactly as it is happening. So thank you for sharing that. I think Floricella has a really important comment that I don't want to miss in chat. She says, or they say, without representation, it's easy to start questioning your own experiences, intelligence, or belonging, even when the real issue is a lack of support or inclusion. That is 100% true, because it really is a challenge. If you don't get support from anywhere, of course you're going to, people with self-awareness or introspection are immediately going to start with self, right? But it's not always self. So yeah, a panel on DEI and all the speakers are the same, but not a member. I've seen so many panels on DEI that don't have a member of a BIPOC community. Like, we're not out here, we're not available. Have you asked? It really is, it's fascinating. And you also asked the question, how long have we been having this conversation? For over 100 years. I can't remember. I feel like I was maybe reading one of Dr. Cook's articles that referenced the fact that like at ALA in 1920, we were having these conversations about lack of diversity in librarianship. And the statistics have not changed in 100 years because we're leaving the profession as quickly as we enter it. So librarianship has some work to do, and museums and archives as related fields. But luckily there are people here who care and are trying to do something. So maybe we can start a tide of positive movement in this area. And that is exactly why it's important to become a scholar practitioner. Yes. Y'all are great. Okay. Also, they say it in a comfortable way that, the patting each other on the back for surface level thinking and engagement. Yeah, the performative, I'm not here for the performative. And actually, I'll get into that in a minute as well. So thank you for that engagement. All right, we are almost near the end of my maybe 12, 13 slides. I went light this time, y'all. Okay, slide 10. Yes, let's talk about social capital. This is a new thing for me, new to me, like I'm just learning about it, not that it hasn't been around for a minute, but when we talk about leadership and empathy, we can't leave out social capital, which, if you didn't know, I'm about to tell you, is the invisible web of trust, relationships, and shared values that make collective action possible. Sociologist Pierre Bourdieu describes social capital as the resources and opportunities available through networks of connection. And Robert Putnam recently wrote a book called Bowling Alone that emphasized that social capital strengthens communities, drives collaboration, civic engagement, and innovation. But here's the thing. Social capital, like everything else in our beautiful country that is sometimes trying, is not distributed equally. Systems of racism, classism, ableism, and other inequities determine who has access to networks of power and whose knowledge gets valued. And this is what we were just talking about. This is why building radical empathy isn't just about emotional intelligence. It's also about redistributing social capital and actively creating pathways for historically excluded communities to thrive, not just survive, thrive in professional and cultural spaces. For BIPOC professionals, especially in libraries, museums, and archives, building networks can often feel like navigating gatekeeping. I'm going to quote Isabel again. So in her work on decentering whiteness in librarianship, she emphasizes that social capital must be understood as culturally situated. Networks, mentorship, and access are shaped by historical and systemic inequities. And recognizing this history matters because it helps us see why some networks feel closed and why deliberate, equity-centered relationship building is critical. But social capital is not just about networking at conferences or joining professional associations, though both can be helpful if you have the time and the resources to do so, but that's not the bottom line. It's about creating authentic connections rooted in care and mutual respect. It's about cultivating bridging capital, which is relationships across difference, and bonding capital, which are relationships that nurture identity and solidarity, things that we bond over, both of which are vital for BIPOC professionals navigating predominantly white institutions. This is where radical empathy and leadership converge, in my mind at least. Leaders and educators can intentionally create spaces that distribute or redistribute social capital through horizontal mentorship models, peer learning communities, and invitations to decision-making tables. These practices challenge systems of exclusion while affirming collective wisdom. I'm going to quote Tricia Hersey again, and as she writes in Rest is Resistance, our entire culture is built on exhaustion, but we don't have to live this way. We can imagine and create new worlds that center care and community, and building social capital through care and empathy is a radical act. It's not about who you know in a transactional sense, it's about how we care for one another and how those relationships fuel justice. All right, so radical empathy is more than understanding another person's perspective. It is a conscious choice to act on that understanding in ways that shift power towards justice. It requires curiosity, humility, and courage. It is both mindset and method, guiding how we make decisions, design programs, and build relationships. Research shows, and we've actually seen the receipts over the last 2 days, that institutions are not neutral. Policies, programs, and leadership structures often replicate in existing inequities. Scholars like Caswell and Cipher argue for embedding empathy and social justice into every aspect of professional practice, from teaching to leadership to community engagement. And centering BIPOC voices in this work is essential. Again, I'm quoting Audra because she is the person. She reminds us, your silence will not protect you. So radical empathy asks us to listen, to amplify, and to act in solidarity, even when it feels uncomfortable or risky. So now I'm going to tell you that I practice what I preach to the best of my ability. So here is my be comfortable with discomfort story. And this is one of the times that I was probably the most uncomfortable at work and wasn't sure what was going to happen. So it was the summer of 2020. And when George Floyd was murdered, it broke me. For all the reasons that we might expect, another Black life gone too soon because of racism in America. But I think this one was worse for me. They affected me more than the other deaths. And there are too many to name, so I'm not even going to start down that road. But I think this one affected me more than the others because I was moving my son to Minneapolis to start law school, and the riots were still happening. And I was like, cool. And when he started undergrad, he went to St. Louis. And so I moved him like a few miles from Ferguson at the time so I was just like, I can't, y'all. It was too much. And at the time, I was also the executive director and CEO of OhioNet, which is a library consortium. And not for the first or last time in my life, I was the only person of color on staff and also the boss. So I knew people were looking to me. And I felt really alone in my leadership journey. Like I didn't even feel like my consortial colleagues could support me in that moment because they were also all white. Like it was, I had friends who could understand because they're people of color and we were experiencing the same hurt. But at work, I didn't know what to do with that. And the first staff meeting we had after George Floyd's murder, we all logged into Zoom and I literally just looked at the camera and said, "I'm not okay." And I started to cry. Oh, girl. And sorry, William, I just called you a girl. It was not meant as a gendered comment, but just because this is who I am. But yeah, Tamir writes, my son didn't wear hoodies for, I don't even know, 3-4 years. It was, these things are awful. They're just awful. So I logged into this meeting. I said, "I'm not okay." And I started to cry on Zoom. It was great. And it was not my intention to do that, but emotion's gonna emotion. And I just sat in silence for a minute, got myself together. We finished our Zoom. It was just our weekly Zoom meeting Tuesday morning. And then I thought that was it. And I was like, great. I just cried in front of the people who report to me. This is awful. But I was wrong, I'm happy to say. 2 things happened that surprised me. Well, maybe more than 2. But first, the world did not end. Nobody questioned my leadership abilities because I shed a tear on a Zoom call or demonstrated an emotion. And that was a real concern. I mean, I'm the only person of color in my organization, but nobody questioned that. And in fact, several of the white folks on the team reached out to me individually to offer words of support and encouragement, or just to say, "I can't imagine what you're experiencing, but I'm so sorry that you are." And that helped. It mattered. The second thing that happened is that the reaction to his murder in the public eye lit a fire in me. So I've been a writer probably since I learned to read and picked up a pen, and I've enjoyed persuasive writing since I was young. I honed that ability in high school and college. I won awards. And then I put it in a box because I didn't use it for work. But that summer really popped the lid right off that box. Like I was like, I have to write about this to get it out, get what was in me out. So I wrote a piece for our organization's monthly newsletter. And instead of my normal like 7 or 10 likes or engagements when I posted it to LinkedIn, I received thousands of, like, it was reposted, it was shared outside of libraries. It was amazing. And it went viral on LinkedIn, like on a Nancy scale, not a Beyonce scale, but thousands of engagements for me is a lot. And people read my words, which in that article were incredibly vulnerable. And then they reached out via email and LinkedIn and messaged me to tell me how my words had impacted them. And more importantly, what action they were taking as a result. And that's what mattered to me. So did I change the world? No, probably not. But did I change some worlds? Maybe, or shifted some perspectives. And that's important. And in doing that, I found my voice again, and that alone made it worth the risk. So if you're thinking about doing something and you're like, "I'm scared to death to do that," I would encourage you, if you are experiencing psychological safety, and if your fear is more from coming inside of you and versus what the outside work conditions are demonstrating to you, if you can take a risk, take a risk. And I'm going to pop the link to the article in there in case anybody wants to know what the heck I'm talking about. But it is one of the best things I think I've maybe ever written. And I wrote it in, fueled by, rage and adrenaline, and the world is terrible and we have to make it better. So radical empathy can be modeled online and in person through thoughtful communication, acknowledging contributions, validating experiences, and creating space for honest dialogue, all of which I believe we've actively modeled over the last 2 days. So if you didn't know how to do it before now, at least you've experienced it and you know that it's possible, and you have some models for how to create it in your environments moving forward. Okay, I am near the end. So reflection is not passive. In the soft revolution, which I hope you all join me in, reflection is a strategic act of justice. So I'm going to invite you to pause and reflect on one last question. What is one practice you will, not can, what is one practice you will embed in your personal or professional life starting today? Because small, consistent actions are revolutionary when they're done intentionally. Whether it's checking in with colleagues, creating a peer mentorship circle, explicitly inviting diverse perspectives into decision-making, whether it's learning about breath work and taking time for yourself. I don't care what it is, but I hope that you will find one practice that you can embed in your personal and professional life moving forward that will help you manage all of the things that we are called to manage. And remember, this is especially important for librarians because you know us. This is not about perfection. This is not about perfection. This is about consistent, courageous practice and embracing vulnerability as a tool for change. Together, by cultivating these skills, we can create professional and cultural spaces that do more than survive. They can thrive with equity, inclusion, and humanity at the center. And so I want to leave you with this. The soft revolution begins with each of us, our care, our courage, our intentionality. Oh, wrong thing. Let's try it again. My mouse is doing who knows what. So try to embed that in some sort of everyday action for yourself. And then I will leave you with this. Softness is strength. Rest is resistance. Empathy is power. And justice is actionable. So I want to thank you for sharing this time with me, and I welcome your questions, reflections, ideas. Let's keep the conversation going, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see your beautiful faces.
That
All
was
right, John, what you got for
amazing as we knew it would be.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So let's see. Dr. Johnson, if you will go to the Q&A box.
Oh, yes, I hadn't even thought about that.
And then if anyone wants to come off mic, we can start raising hands and having some conversation with Nancy.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Nancy. We greatly appreciate you and sharing and inspiring us. There were people in the chat that responded to your question. I said that I would, well, I didn't put in the chats in my chat box. I said that I would complete one project before adding two more.
Well, that's good. Yes.
It's good if I can employ it. So
yeah, I was like, maybe we need to find accountability partners before we leave today, because I feel you on that one.
Well, my accountability partner got the same problem, so I don't know
Oh, no.
how that's going to work with Dr. Cook, but hey, it is what it is. We doing this work. Geneva said continuing peer mentoring, circle, and journaling.
Oh, yep. Two great ways to keep that work going. Absolutely.
And anyone else wants to add in the chat, feel free to. Also, if you have additional questions, please use the Q&A box. We do have a question in the Q&A box, and I think as a library leader, you definitely have insight. As more and more library systems, at least in my area, are removing the MLIS requirement for librarians and educational requirements for library assistants, how do we ensure the curriculum is part of the job, on-the-job training or in our workplaces?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I feel like there are a lot of things that we need to know in librarianship that we absolutely do not learn in library school. I mean, nobody told me that I would spend half of my day as a director putting paper and copier machines and dealing with building issues and that, right? There's tons of things in a variety of things. So my suggestion is, depending on your system, if you can work with HR to say, listen, we notice that we're getting, new librarians, current, recent grads, or even people who have been in the field who are lacking this certain set of skills. So we've developed this curriculum to address that and ask for their assistance in employing that. Maybe it just becomes, as part of a lot of places, the first 90 days are on probation anyway, even though it's not. So maybe this becomes part of the training process and you integrate it into their work and allow them time from the workday to learn that curriculum and not add it as some extra thing that they have to do after the fact. It needs to be, they need to be paid to do it like they're everything else. That's how I would approach it. So.
I would absolutely agree with that sentiment. And for those of you who are in academia and have a job description that does an allocation such as 80-10-10, it's usually like a small percentage of service and scholarship, which includes professional development. What I find is that people don't actually carve out time and they just kind of either put it on their evening schedule or weekend. But that's technically, if it's 10%, that's like, it can be anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a week, depending on the percentage allocation. But I noticed that most people will not actually, oh, well, on Friday or Tuesday or whatever the day it is, I'm doing, this thing, scholarship. So I make sure that my people, particularly my new and mid-career professionals, carve out that time, because while it is something that needs to be done for promotional purposes, it's also a good time to just like slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of calendaring things like that. So just for my own like sanity. So I've learned now, like if I'm doing a talk, 3 weeks ago, I calendared 4 hours to do the research to write this talk, because otherwise I would have been up last night trying to like get this stuff done, and that's not helpful for me or whatever. So this kind of stuff does matter, and that calendaring also lets other people in my life know, like, you cannot interrupt me from noon to 4 on this day, because I already have, it might be thought work, but it's still work and it matters. So finding a way to honor that. The other thing that I learned during the pandemic is what I learned about this, was sort of started to implement, was no meeting Wednesdays. So it's not, you need a day of the week where you're not going to things. So there are exceptions. If the provost or the president or anybody above me on the org chart wants to meet any day of the week, I am absolutely available. But barring that, I don't schedule regular meetings on Wednesday, recurring meetings, and I let my assistant know, please try not to schedule things on Wednesdays if we can avoid it. And he does. So it's nice to have that sort of midweek reset where even if I haven't already calendared something, I kind of know in the back of my head most weeks, I have a minute on Wednesday to breathe and then go, what do I need to be focused on? Or what is the thing I need to work on? So if your workspace allows that, I would encourage you to try it out and see what you think.
Absolutely. I'm going to go through some of the comments. And feel free, please, to respond to any of them, Nancy. Tamara says, continue to stay connected, affinity groups, communities of practices, and of course, mentor mentees. And Desiree noted, just going through some of these comments, Desiree noted, I will do a monthly check-in with myself to make sure I stay in line with my outreach activities, excuse me, and look for other opportunities as well. So there's some intentionality there, as you just mentioned. And I was encouraged during my annual review to carve out dedicated time in my daily, weekly schedule for scholarship. And William says his problem is, so one, we're self-aware that William has a problem. This could be used to diversify the field, but in the system, it was an excuse to appoint a white woman with a no academic credential to an assistant director position over the 6 MLIS holders and including. And I will say to that note, William, we've seen, I know here in the state of Georgia, but a number of southern states, the attack on the MLIS degree for reasons because if I appoint this person, and by all means, I want to give the perspective on what is happening. If I appoint this person, they will do what I want as far as how I feel about access to information. Because remember, libraries are not political, but access is. Luckily for us in the state of Georgia, that failed. In many other states, it failed as well. But we do see in rural areas where this is not new. Let's be very clear, this is not new because there are still many rural areas that have local libraries that do not require the MLS or the MLIS degree. And that has been many, many decades running. But we do want to see the manipulation and control in attacking of the MLS degree, because then I can appoint who I want to, who's going to do my will, much like what we're seeing at the federal level.
Right. And not just Georgia. I know when I lived in Michigan, there were many, many, especially small public and rural libraries that the library director was not a librarian because they couldn't attract library candidates. So the degree requirements were basically dismissed, which is, can be challenging. So I'm going to share, pivoting just a little bit because we've kind of talked about how to find time and reflect and all that. A tool that I use every year called Year Compass. I just threw it down in chat. If you're looking for a way to, if you need like a guided exercise to figure out what you're doing, where you're headed, what you want to accomplish, I encourage you check this out. I started it probably, I think 4 or 5 years ago. My best friend was like, you should do this. And I was like, yeah, I should. So every year between Christmas and New Year's, I sit down, I pull out my calendar, and this is not about resolutions. I mean, if you do resolutions, kudos to you, but they don't work for me. So this is really an activity for recognizing all of the things that you've made it through in the past year at work, personally, vacations, family, whatever, and honoring that, and then taking some time to reflect on, things you don't want to bring into the new year, and then setting your goals and your intentions for the next year. And then you usually choose a word for the year and you sign a little contract with yourself. It's a beautiful tool. I look forward to doing it every year. I share it as broadly as I can. And every year I pick a word that challenges me. So one year I picked, I don't even, it started out with I think courage or something. One year I was like, I'm going to say yes to everything. This year, the word I picked was ascending. And I am loving being in my year of ascension. So it's just, but it does inform you. And the part that's always interesting to me is I usually do it in December, January. I forget about it usually at least till July, sometimes until the next December. But when I go back and look at the list of things that I wanted to accomplish for the year, despite not having looked at that piece of paper in 6, 9, 12 months, I have inevitably gotten at least 50% of them done. So it really is that active intention of writing down this thing I want to do and planting that seed somewhere in your brain that later you do the thing. So if you need a tool like that, it's free. It's in 30 something languages. You can do it online. You can do it on your tablet. You can print it out. You can type it. They have made it super accessible. So give it a try.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much for your talk. Anyone? I think I see another question in Q&A. Let's see. Oh, okay. Can anyone share advice from someone who was accepted into a PhD program but has a strong feeling of imposter syndrome? I should have celebrated my acceptance, but I feel overwhelmed. In short, if they didn't want you, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah. My thing is always go look at your CV or your resume. If your CV or resume dispels the things that you're feeling, it's time to let that go.
Yeah, because the PhD program is not something
That's no joke.
Yeah, PhD JD program is not something. As much as we see them and we know people, it's just not common. So
they don't just let us in out of pity, y'all.
They really don't. They don't have to.
No, they don't. Yeah.
These programs cost the institution money. In case you guys do not know, they are not letting you in, not even on a check mark.
Yep.
You have to show some form of exceptional promise to contribute to research in your field. Those PhD programs and even JD programs, these are research and practitioner degrees on a different level that cost the institution money. If they did not want you, whomever, it was anonymous, if they did not want you, you would not be there. So shake your internal imposter treatment and lock in.
Yep. What she said.
So please don't get me started. Okay, we're at the end of the day, y'all. Don't start that. Take up space. I saw something. Forget the movie that it was in. It said not only take up space. It said be the shadow.
Ooh.
Be the shadow. Can you get rid of your shadow? It is so far
beyond deep. That's I like that.
Hold on, because I wrote it down. Hold on. I know I did. It just struck me. So I was in a movie theater, and I remember this character saying, "Be the shadow," and I was just like shook because we downplay ourselves so much because we're expected to be humble. But a PhD program is not about you being humble. It was the book of Clarence. Be the body, not the shadow. Hold all space. So don't play background. But again, yes, Gabby, constellation. Build your constellation. Exactly. And also, because we have so many of us on this call, if you are interested in a PhD program, it's nothing to have a conversation with people. Like, do this. If you are interested in any form of advanced research degree, such as the PhD to JD, go for it. The worst they can tell you is no, and that's the absolute worst that they can tell you. I'm gonna turn this over to Dr. Cook because I see where this gonna go. Let's not.
I was gonna say, please don't get her started today. Dr. Johnson, if you would please put that last quote in the chat, please. And just to piggyback on what Dr. Johnson said, if they tell you no, then you just try again. Right? It's really not a thing. All right. So Nancy, did you have anything else? We are so grateful for your words and your wisdom. So many wonderful things to look up, and we will post the reference list so you all have everything that Nancy talked about, so we can all do some collective reading.
Just thank you again for having me. I'll share my slides as well in case they're helpful for anybody. You've got the resource list, and people say this all the time, but we genuinely mean it. If there's any way that I can help any of you individually, reach out to me, please. And Kirkpatrick@smith.edu. I'll put it in the chat.
All righty. Thank you so much. The power of the collective. All right. So just a quick, as my mother would say, a quick hitch in the giddy up here. I have a fur baby issue. Just for tax, I'm putting his picture in the chat. So I need to go see about him. So Dr. Johnson is going to close us out, answer any remaining questions, let you know how to remain involved, invested. As I've been saying to you, we certainly want to continue this collective work with you. All right, so I just want to extend again my profound thanks to you all for spending time with us and really just being so engaged and digging in. Shout out to David for keeping us visually engaged and having teaching us how to learn and listen in different ways. To all of our speakers, our keynote panelists this morning, and to Dr. Nancy, and to everyone who was with us yesterday. It has been an amazing and fulfilling 2 days. And certainly Dr. Johnson and I have been able to conclude this program with the bang that we envisioned. So it is all thanks to you. So I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to update the website tonight with summaries and all of the PowerPoints and all of these things. And then Dr. Johnson will send you those links tomorrow. All right, so everyone be well, but stay tuned, and Dr. Johnson will close us out.